Hi David, thanks for agreeing to have this interview. I know you're a very busy man, now you're Prime Minister, and doing a good job too, if I might say so.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell me a little bit about the changes in your life from moving as an MP into what is the most senior role in government?
Well, it's obviously a big change because you suddenly have a huge number of extra responsibilities. I do try and make sure I still do a good job as a constituency MP. I mean, here we are on a Friday in my constituency office. I'm about to hold a surgery, see a range of constituents. But inevitably, you have to spend more time in London, you have to spend more time in Westminster, you have to travel a great deal. So it is a difficult act. What I say to my constituents is that they see less of me because I'm Prime Minister. They see less of me in the constituency, but I have a greater ability to get things done. So I hope it's a fair balance.
But there must be other massive changes. I mean, security must be with you all the time. There's a whole...
Yes, that's right. You do. You suddenly have a new life where you... I haven't driven a car for the last 9 months. That is a big change in my life. So that does change things, but they are good. My protection team in trying to allow me to live as normal a life as possible. So I'm still able to get out to the shops and meet people and do things like surgeries and whatever. So big changes, but manageable.
How do you intend to support the countryside? I know you live in the countryside in Oxfordshire.
I think the biggest thing is the whole localism agenda is actually driving down power to the local level, giving local councils more power and also asking councils to devolve power even beyond them to community groups, organisations, parishes, town councils. I think the frustration many have felt in the countryside in recent years is too much has been decided in the city, in Westminster, in Whitehall, and their views not taken into account. So I think that's the biggest single thing. I think we also have to support the farming industry, which we're doing by reforming labelling, so we get more accurate labelling, and by also removing some of the regulations that farmers face. So I think a strong farming industry, and I think more decisions made locally, I think those things can make a big difference.
Do you think that people understand land and its use and ownership as well as they might in this country?
I think probably not, but I think by pushing this power downwards and by enabling people to do things to solve problems, for instance, Home on the Farm is an initiative that we have, which is to allow farmers to develop agricultural buildings to provide houses. Community land trusts, where we're saying, why not allow the community to own the land and then to build homes, so the homes are cheaper because they don't involve the land price. Our whole housing revolution, where we're scrapping the top-down targets set by regions and by national government, and saying that we should reward those areas that build new homes by letting them keep the council tax. That's a bottom-up system rather than a top-down one. In these ways, I think there should be a better understanding of countryside, land, building and the rest of it.
And it sounds like there's an application of common sense in some of those policies. We have talked about that previously. How do you feel about common sense in the new environment in government, in Parliament?
Well, I think it should be a big test of policy. I mean, obviously every morning I wake up, I go through my box of all the policy proposals, all the things that are coming through, all the things that government departments are doing. And one of the things I try to apply is a sort of basic common sense test to it. So for instance, the vetting and barring scheme, the Criminal Records Bureau checks. I don't think this did pass the common sense test. We were suddenly finding that parents who were taking other children to football matches or running a creche or running a Sunday school were suddenly going to have to be vetted, and all sorts of new lists would be created. This clearly didn't pass the common sense test, and it was a roadblock to a bigger society where people volunteer and take part more. So that's a good example of something where we're scrapping a lot of that, changing a lot of that, and applying some common sense.
One of the difficult issues you must have as Prime Minister is that you are given a lot of advice by a lot of consultants and people who know a lot of stuff. How do you ensure that, apart from your own research that you do on a personal level, you get the right quality of advice?
That's a very, very good question. I mean, basically, I try to have a good team around me. So I have, I think, a strong cabinet. And if you take, for instance, the rural and countryside issues, you know, I've got a farming minister in Jim Pace who himself is a farmer and knows about the countryside. I've got Caroline Spellman, who has huge experience working with the National Farmers Union in the past. So I think I have a good team, but I think the key as Prime Minister is, are you testing and challenging and probing the advice that you're given? And that's where I try to have some independent advice through my policy unit, and through other experts. So I can really give the machine a good shake and make sure that I'm not just accepting what is coming through the system, but I'm challenging and questioning it. That, I think, is one of the keys.
Have you found as PM the situation to be what you thought it would be when you were not PM?
Look, lots of things you find that you didn't fully expect. I spend a lot more time on the security agenda, terrorism, threats to national security, a lot more time on that than perhaps I thought. That's a huge concern. I think the quantity of government decisions and policies, I think what I call the sausage machine, which even if you didn't have active ministers trying to change things and improve them, there's just a vast amount of regulation and change that comes through the system, and the amount of time you have to spend trying to stop things. You know, you think in politics it's all about trying to start something, but a lot of the time you're trying to stop things that would actively make the situation worse. That is, perhaps that shouldn't have surprised me, but that has a bit.
On that level, do you think that the civil service, which advises and supports government, should be accountable, should be culpable?
I think they are accountable, and I think one of the great myths about British politics is that somehow there's this malign civil service, and if only, you know, we change more regularly at the top of the civil service, the world will be a better place. I don't think that's fair. What I find personally in number 10 Downing Street is an absolute Rolls Royce of a machine, incredibly talented people. What they require is ministers who are able to master their brief, to take decisions, to give them guidance, to say yes to this, to say no to that, to make decisions rapidly and consistently. And if you do that, I mean, what I would say is that there's a Rolls Royce in the garage. It's a question of if you know how to apply the right brake and the right gear and the right touch on the steering wheel, then it will work for you. And don't blame them. You know, the mistakes are very often made by the politicians, not the civil servants. And I think sometimes we get that the wrong way around.
Well, I know we're short of time. We'll wrap it up there.
Thanks
very much for finding the time. I hope we'll find time again to talk about some of these issues.
Not at all.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
And you.
Thanks.